Hello, everybody. My name's Bruce Lawson, and this is a talk called How to Make Loveliness. That's me, and that is the official W3C HTML5 logo, because that is largely what this talk will be about. And in fact, if you didn't know, HTML is actually an acronym for the words How to Make Loveliness. Now, I'm here today because Barry invited me. I was one of the editors for the HTML 5.3 specification at the W3C. I was on the committee that wrote the British Standard for Web Accessibility, BS 8878, at the British Standards Institution. And I co-wrote these books introducing HTML5 and Web Accessibility. Don't bother buying them, they're out of date and there's PDFs all over the web anyway. But that's not actually the reason that I'm here. I'm here because of this. In the late 90s, I was head of primary at this school, Am Noi Sin, in Bangkok, in Thailand. And I noticed something weird going on with my left arm and left leg and left eye. So being a man, I ignored it. And then when I eventually went to the doctors, they diagnosed me with something called multiple sclerosis. Here you can see one of these scleroses, of which I have multiple ones, hence the names, in my spicy brain. This is what they look like, apparently. But anyway, in Thailand, because it's close to the equator, they don't have MS. So it was very difficult for anybody to give me any information about my condition. They very kindly sought out some English language medical textbooks and Xeroxed some pages. But as I was lying in my hospital bed, I didn't find these doctors' images of autopsied brains terribly encouraging, bizarrely. So when I learned to walk again and got back to my apartment in central Bangkok, I noticed that in the block across the street was something called an internet cafe. So I went in there and I typed in multiple sclerosis into Alta Vista, which was like Google, but it was in black and white and powered by Steam. And I found this, something called Julie's Joint. Yes, it really looked like this. It was really in Comic Sans because this is in 1999. Julie's Joint was what it says on the top, people with MS supporting each other. And it was people from all around the world, New Zealand, Norway, Canada, UK, etc. Just normal people, just regular folks like me, supporting each other through the web. And I thought to myself, wow, this is amazing. Here is a technology where anybody can participate wherever they are in the world, whatever computer they have, whatever their social economic background, without an intermediary. This is the communication of the future. And I want some of that. So I got involved with web standards. And here I am in front of a sign in a Tokyo department store. Over there, HTML is a brand of men's clothing. They let me take a photograph and then the police came to arrest me. But yeah, my name's Bruce and I'm an HTML alcoholic. Doesn't mean that I don't use modern tools. Just today in my job, I was using GitHub and Webpack and React. I'm not afraid of them, regardless of what this graffiti I saw on a wall in Bucharest told me. But I know that these things are tools. Now, GitHub and React, they are well-known tools with lots of money behind them. Well-known tools with lots of money behind them, but they are only tools. I like furniture. I stockpiled lots before Brexit to burn for heat. And this is the Bible of furniture making since it was published in the 70s. It's very interesting. It's a big, thick book. The introduction tells you that although you're going to use lots of machinery to make furniture, if you, it says he, because in those days, of course, anybody who did anything with their hands was a man. But if he has to saw that piece of wood by hand, he'll be more likely to know that much more about it. He will have greater respect for it and will understand in greater depth the problems that will have to be faced in its manipulation. And that's why in this 500-page book, the first 100 pages doesn't deal with making furniture at all. You've got these interesting tables on the moisture content of different kinds of wood. You have these photographs of the different kinds of grain. The first step to making furniture is not understanding a lathe, it's understanding wood. The author also says, additional to this need for all machine operators to know their material and how best it can be shaped are questions of quality, not only in the artifact, but also of the artificer himself. In other words, it's not bad wood that makes bad furniture, it's a bad carpenter as well. There's another book, because I'm obsessed with furniture, as you can tell by now. There's another book called Japanese Woodworking Tools, Their Tradition, Spirit and Use by Toshio Odate. And in this, there's a couple of very interesting points. The Japanese word shokunin is defined by both Japanese and Japanese to English dictionaries as craftsman or artisan, but such a literal description does not fully express the deeper meaning. Shokunin means not only having technical skill, but also implies an attitude and social consciousness, a social obligation to work his best for the general welfare of the people, an obligation both material and spiritual. And I think that we in the technology industry need not to just be craftsmen or carpenters, but shokunin, to show a social obligation with the things that we make. You'll have heard of this guy. You call him Sir Tim Berners-Lee. I call him Sir Uncle Timbo, because he's from Birmingham like me, and he once asked me to sign his copy of my HTML5 book. But Sir Uncle Timbo memorably said at the beginning of the London 2012 Olympics, this, meaning the web, is for everyone. This is the first ever website running on a modern Chromium-based browser. As you can see, I can resize the screen and all the text will reflow. I can use the tab key and tab through the links and see which link is focused at any point and hit the space bar or the enter button and go to that link. The web, by design, was completely responsive and completely accessible out of the box from its inception. But web developers, we broke it. We broke it in a myriad different ways. We broke it by insisting upon a fixed width for a website. This was very common in the early 2000s. Everybody's got an 800 by 600 monitor. And then the iPhone came out. We broke it by deliberately choosing bad contrasts with our fonts and colors. I wear specs, but otherwise I've got good eyesight. But I'm a gentleman of a certain age, and I find it difficult to read light grey text on a white background. We broke it by insisting upon a pixel-perfect layout, even though electrons behind glass is not the same as paper. We broke it by putting videos on the web and not adding captions for people who are hard of hearing or people in a shared office or people on public transport. We broke it by not acknowledging that many of our users would like to use a keyboard, so we insisted upon listening for clicks rather than key presses. We broke it by suppressing the focus indicator. That's the thing that draws a ring around the link or form field that you're currently focused on. So I don't care if you choose to use React Mbengular, Bonestrap, Hubpack.js, or whatever cool technology du jour is out there. Knock yourself out. Use whatever it is you want, but remember to understand what you're making and the raw materials. In furniture, that is wood. In the web, it's the holy trio, the triumvirate of JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS, as symbolized by this photograph from Mobile World Congress in Barcelona a few years ago. On the left, Brendan Eich, who invented JavaScript. On the right, 𝒕𝒊𝒄𝒌 Lee, who invented CSS. And not Sir Timbo in the middle, that's me. I merely invented the picture elements, but I'm symbolizing HTML. A lot of modern framework developers will tell you that JavaScript is for all the things and it is in opposition or it is superior to HTML and CSS. This is not true. As you can see from this image, the three of us can share a beer and a convivial chat in perfect harmony. These three things work together. HTML, out of the box, is declarative. You say button, click me, close tag, and a button appears on the screen. You don't need to work out how that happens. You don't need to do anything magical to make it keyboard focusable or to make it activatable with the space bar. You just declare it to be so, and it is so. Brilliant. HTML is fault tolerant. Don't do this because the blink tag is the work of Satan and Internet Explorer never implemented it. But if in old IE you had blink, oh my God, you're having a seizure, IE would still render the text inside the tags it doesn't understand. If it doesn't understand a tag, it will just show the content because the content is the king. This makes HTML forward and backwards compatible. So here, for example, we have the HTML5 video elements. Now, when HTML5 came out about 10 years ago now in IE 6, 7, you couldn't show video. So IE would ignore the video tag and it would show the contents of the video element. In this case, can't play it, download it with a link to the MP4, and the user would download it and then double click in their downloads file and see the video in their media player. Nobody got a worse or significantly worse experience. Nobody missed out on the content. And for browsers that could understand the video element, this just worked. So I've shown you that an ancient website works in a modern browser. Here is the first ever browser running my personal website. As you can see, you have to open it up in this attractive way, choose brucelawson.co.uk, and there we are. Okay, there's no images, there's no fancy layout. Some of the Unicode things are broken, but the content works. You can tab and scroll through the links, click on them, and go there. It might not be beautiful, but all the content is available from a modern WordPress-powered website on the first ever web browser that Sir Uncle Timbo made. HTML is interoperable. Here we have misnested tags. Before HTML5, this would make a different DOM in different browsers because the HTML4 spec merely specified what to do with good markup. Now, I know that everybody listening to this has never had a syntax error in their code, but you've all worked with losers who do. But HTML5 has a tightly defined algorithm that will define what browsers should render as their DOM with any conceivable permutation of markup, good or bad. And this is fantastic if you use, I don't know, Chrome at work, Safari on your phone, and Firefox at home. You still want to be able to access your bank or your shopping sites on all of them. This is because of the HTML5 parsing algorithm. I like to think of it as the ninja of HTML. It's very often not noticed or never talked about, but it is absolutely powerful and a killer feature. CSS, likewise, is fault tolerant. So here I have a button. I define its foreground color. The text color is black. Its background is white. Then I give a background image as a gradient. And then I define a fancy damn new API called the Houdini API, where it can paint attractive shapes on the background. If the browser understands the Houdini API, it'll paint a fancy shape. If the browser doesn't understand the Houdini API, it will try to show a nice gradient. And a very old browser that doesn't understand gradient will fall back to the white background with the black text on top of it, which isn't beautiful, but it is a fantastic contrast that everybody will be able to see and use. Now, by contrast, JavaScript is not declarative. It's imperative. Imperative programming focuses on describing how a program operates. So declarative, you just say, make this happen. With imperative programming with JavaScript, you say, do this, then do this, then do that, then do that. And it is a lot more brittle. It's a lot more fragile. Sir Uncle Timbo himself said, in what he called the principle of the least power in his document for the design principles that he employed when he developed the web, the choice of language is a common design choice. The low power end of the scale is typically simpler to design, implement, and use, but the high power end of the scale has all the attraction of being an open-ended hook into which anything can be placed. In other words, use the simplest tool for the job. Use the tool with the least power that will accomplish what you want. So if you want to show something on hover, use CSS hover rather than JavaScript. If you want to click on some text and it goes somewhere else, use a link element, an A element in HTML rather than doing it in JavaScript. In short, use the right tool for the right job, and this will make your websites considerably more robust. 13 million requests for JavaScript will time out a month. Now, everybody thinks that everybody has JavaScript apart from some mad people. But actually, and this is BuzzFeed, not some obscure site in sub-Saharan Africa, our monitoring tells us that 1% of requests for JavaScript on BuzzFeed time out. That's 13 million requests per month. Phil Hawksworth, now of Netlify, when he tweeted this, said, a reminder, if one were needed, that we should design for resilience. Everybody has JavaScript, right? Asked my friend Stuart Langridge. Well, no. When your page hasn't fully loaded, you don't have any JavaScript. Did it crap out halfway through? Does your mobile operator interfere with the JavaScript? Does your corporate firewall? Is the CDN down? There are many, many reasons why you might not have JavaScript at this moment. Maybe you're going through a tunnel on the train. Maybe you're walking down into a tube station. Progressive enhancement makes sure that your websites will still work without JavaScript. They may not be whiz-bang, they may not be sleek, but they will still work, and that's what they're for. HTML also gives us freebies. Get it? I'm going to pause for laughter. So, for example, we've all seen, we may have even written something like this, a checkbox saying, check if you don't want to opt out of cancelling or stopping sending you spam forever. Now, the top one is badly implemented. The bottom one is well implemented. Apart from a little bit of spacing on the right of the checkbox, which would be simple to sort out with some trivial CSS, they look exactly the same. The top one is hard to fill in because if I click in that long label, nothing happens. I have to click into the checkbox. Whereas the bottom one, if I click in the long label, it puts the focus into the checkbox and selects it. This is great for people who are using the keyboard to navigate. It's also great if you've got porky little programmer's digits like I have, and you're on a small screen mobile phone on a bumpy train. The difference is I'm using HTML properly in the bottom one. So the top one, I have an input type equals checkbox, and that label, or what looked like a label, is just a span of plain text. The bottom one, I've actually given the label a label element, and that will associate it with the checkbox. That will, if I focus into the checkbox and I have a screen reader, it will read out the label. If I click in the label, it will put focus into the checkbox. It doesn't look any different. It might not behave any different if you're the kind of person who's dexterous with a mouse, but to somebody who does need it, like me with my multiple sclerosis, or somebody with a screen reader, or somebody on a bumpy train, it's made their lives slightly better at no cost to you as a developer. The reason this works is that your HTML tells the browser what it is you're writing, and your browser tells the operating system. It will map HTML things to things that are native in the OS, and all OSs have checkboxes and date pickers and sliders, etc. And if your user is using assistive technology, such as a screen reader, that interrogates the operating system's accessibility tree, and that is communicated to the user. So, for example, if you use a button, a native HTML button, you could use a div and hook some JavaScript to it, but you have to remember to set its ARIA role in HTML or JavaScript. You have to remember to manage focusability, because a div is not focusable by default. And you have to remember to listen for the correct key presses, usually the space bar and the enter key. And if somebody comes and copies your code and pastes it somewhere else and messes this up, it's broken. Whereas if you just use a button element, it will just work. You don't have to do any of those extra things. So here we have an old style HTML page. You've got nav on the side, a header with your corporate logo, a footer with some blah, blah in it, and then a central content area. Each of these articles might be a YouTube video, might be a product on Amazon, it might be attractive gold sovereign rings that you're trying to buy on argos.co.uk. It could be a news article, it could be a blog post, it could be anything. Pre-HTML5, we didn't have a dedicated tag or element for header, footer, nav, etc. So we gave everything the div element, a generic container. But the div element has no special meaning at all. And in fact, the specification says authors are strongly encouraged to view the div element as the element of last resort for when no other element is suitable. Use of more appropriate elements instead of the div element leads to better accessibility for readers and easier maintainability for authors. It's better for your readers, and it's better for you as a developer. Win-win. So now in HTML5, we have this. We have a header element. We have the main element. We have the nav element. We have the footer element. And these are great. All assistive technologies have a key press that will allow somebody to jump straight to the nav or jump straight over the nav and into the main part of the page. If you don't use an assistive technology, this is entirely transparent to you. It doesn't make your life any worse. If you do use an assistive technology, it makes your life better. And as a developer, it is no more difficult to type in NAV in angle brackets than it is DIV. If your components now say div class equals nav, then just change it to nav class equals nav, and probably your CSS is hanging on the class attribute, and nothing will even break, and it will make it a little bit better for the people who need that extra help. And screen reader users love this. In the 2019 survey of screen reader users by WebAIM, thank you to them for letting me use the slide, 25% of screen reader users use these header, nav, main elements whenever they're present. 18% use them often, 28% use them seldom. Only 28% seldom or never use them. So these things really make a difference to the people who need them. And it's not just for the people who need them. Accessibility is a subset of usability. High conformance with web accessibility guidelines may provide benefits to users without disabilities. In a study at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, Messrs. Schmutz, Sonderegger, and Sauer, and I apologize if I mispronounce their names, ran an experiment. They had different sites with different levels of web accessibility, and they asked non-disabled users to rate them. So 61 participants without disabilities used one of 3 websites differing in levels of accessibility. A high level of web accessibility led to better performance than low or very low accessibility. Likewise, high web accessibility improved user ratings, i.e. perceived usability, aesthetics, workload, and trustworthiness, compared to low or very low web accessibility. These are people who didn't need the extra help, but found the websites better anyway. If you take nothing else from this talk home with you, take this slide. Wherever the fluffy bunny of good markup goes, the Tweety bird of accessibility and usability follows along for the ride. This is a friend of mine called Jamie Knight. He's an autistic developer who works for the BBC. And he said something that resonates very strongly with me, quoted by another friend of mine called Glenda Sims. No one comes to our sites disabled. They come with impairments. We disable them. Sir Uncle Timbo again. Sir Uncle Timbo said on the web's 30th birthday, "The web is for everyone, and collectively we hold the power to change it. It won't be easy, but if we dream a little and work a lot, we can get the web we want." So what can you do? You can learn the semantics, the meaning of the tags of HTML. There are 120-ish elements, that's all. I say ish because some of them are rarely used. Some of them are used only in very, very, very specialized circumstances. But let's put that into perspective. Most 2-year-old humans can say 100 words in their native language. By the time your toddler is 2.5, she'll probably know close to 300 words. There's 120 words in HTML. I'm merely asking you to be more fluent in the lingua franca of the web than this baby. And I can tell you that this also was delicious. You can also run automated tests and go for low-hanging fruit on your websites. Color contrast, for example. The marvellous WebAIM did automated tests on the top 1 million home pages. And they found that the most failures, the most common errors, are actually the most easy ones to deal with. Low contrast was the highest found error. Missing alternative text, that is, images that don't have alternate text to explain their meanings. Empty links. Missing form labels. We've seen that, how HTML forms make things better. Missing document language. This is as simple as saying HTML lang equals EN for English at the top of your website and telling an assistive technology to read it out in English, because the string SIX is pronounced 6 in English and 6 in French, for example. It makes a difference. And missing buttons were present on 250,000 of the top 1 million home pages. And these things are easy to diagnose. So if you go here, brucelawson.github.io/totally, spelt with 1 as the L's, because that's the abbreviation for accessibility, /totally.html. My employers paid me some money to write a tool, and on Global Accessibility Awareness Day this year, they gave me permission to open source it. So a lot of these accessibility inspection tools look a bit like this. They'll tell you all the errors over your web page, and frankly, if you're not an accessibility expert, it's like looking at this. It's very daunting. Totally, on the other hand, is like this. You get a menu button, you pop it open, and you can check your headings. If you check your headings, you'll get this overlay showing you the structure of your heading structure, and where it's green, it's good, and if it's red, it's not good. and it will show you where it is on the pages. I should say, by the way, that the lion's share of this UI is from Khan Academy, from whom I forked it. You can check contrast on your page, and it will show you where the contrast is inadequate. That you could crack open DevTools and experiment with different contrasts. You can check link text. Is there alt text? Are there empty elements? Because, for example, an empty heading that perhaps somebody has put in to get some spacing could be announced to a screen reader user. It'll check your landmarks and ARIA roles if you have superfluous title attributes. And it will show the accessible name and a description that will be passed to a screen reader, for example, when you're hovering over a form field. So that's headings. Here, for example, I'm expecting contrast. 𝒂𝒄𝒂, the people who claim to be able to solve all accessibility errors if you buy their overlay, on their homepage, they have inadequate contrast. That blue on blue doesn't have enough contrast to be seen adequately by somebody with a visual impairment. I'm not saying this tool will do everything, but it tries not to clutter your page and overload you with information that might be overwhelming, and it tries to address the most common errors. You can use HTML and CSS wherever possible. There are many things you can only do in JavaScript. Do them in JavaScript. But if you can do them in HTML and CSS, remember the principle of the least power. And make sites that work without JavaScript. They might be clunky. It might be trips back to the server and page refreshes rather than Ajax loveliness. But that will still work. The person can still accomplish their task. And then enhance them with JavaScript. And choose your libraries carefully. A lot of libraries out there claim to have great developer experience, but do they have great user experience, particularly for people who need assistive technologies? So, for example, React Bootstrap, it has a nav component, but the nav component, if you look at the code it generates, it's a div class equals nav. That could so easily be nav class equals nav, and be a lot easier for a screen reader user to use. So that doesn't pass the Bruce test. Also, make your sites lean and mean. The amount of JavaScript being transmitted over the wire or over the air is relentlessly creeping up. Alex Russell, who until last week was a big noise in the Chrome team, called it the developer experience bait and switch. We cannot continue to use as much JavaScript as is now normal and expect the web to flourish. To get this fixed, we need to confront the developer experience bait and switch. Tools that cost the poorest users to pay wealthy developers are bunk. In other words, if by making your life easier so you do less work, you're offloading effort and money to your users, then something's terribly wrong. Smartphones, of course, have taken over the world, but the majority of smartphones are not super whizzy iPhone 12s. They're overwhelmingly Android, low cost and low spec. Last Google I/O, they said that 25% of new Android shipments go out with 512 megabytes of RAM. Android devices have very limited storage, often a dual SIM. And of course, not only are people using low spec devices, data costs vary wildly around the world. A gigabyte of data in Malawi costs $27 US. And that's not adjusted for per capita income. That is in real money. On the other side of the coin, the cheapest data in the world is India, 0.9 cents for a gigabyte of data. Then Israel, 11 cents, Kyrgyzstan, Italy, and Ukraine. Startlingly, the highest average cost for a gigabyte of data is 30,000% more than the cheapest average price. And if you are sending down massive images, massive JavaScript libraries, that is eating up the data plan for people in those poorer countries where data is comparatively more expensive. That might not matter to you if you're only marketing to people with the latest iPhones in California. But if you're trying to do business in Eastern Europe or in Asia or Africa, which of course is where the demographics of the world is growing, this should make a difference to you. So Uncle Timbo in the Web Foundation quoted this: in Nigeria, the data needed to watch just 2 minutes of an online video a day can cost more than sending a child to school for a month. Now, I know that auto-playing 2-minute video of your chief exec making a speech about synergies is thrilling and fascinating, but it is not more thrilling and fascinating than educating a child. Similarly, your React application will never load faster than about 1.1 seconds on an average phone in India, no matter how much you optimize it. Your Angular app will always take at least 2.7 seconds to boot up. And because you're sending down lots of JavaScript, which the device has to parse and run to construct a DOM, you are hosing that user's battery, which means that more and more people in India, for example, when they buy a device, they're automatically buying a power pack, which has to be charged. This is eating up power and wasting resources. There's 7.4 billion people in the world. 1.1 billion are like us and they have high-speed internet. 3.2 billion people have access to broadband. 5.2 billion have access to mobiles, and 7 billion live within mobile coverage. So a lot of people still to come online. Understandably, a lot of these people are in India and China because those are collectively at least 40% of the world's population. But it's not only India and China. In Russia, 55 million are not online yet. In Thailand, 48 million are not. In the US, there are 51 million people still not online. And by the year 2100, a bit late for me, but you're probably all young and groovy, by the year 2100, 50% of the world's population will live in these 10 countries. Only one of them, the US, are what you might call a fully developed economy today. This is infrastructure in most parts of the world. This was taken out of the window from my apartment in Bangkok. Replacing all this with fiber optic cables is gonna take decades. In India, in Asia, in sub-Saharan Africa, networks are overloaded, just like this truck that overtook my taxi in Rajasthan in North India. But the World Bank says making the internet universally accessible and affordable should be a global priority. Developing countries are home to 94% of the global offline population. And this matters because whereas we all know that the internet is for making money and showing pictures of cats, to many people in the world, it is absolutely a lifeline. If you are somewhere where it might be miles to walk to see a doctor, a feature phone and a PDF of Where There Is No Doctor, a village healthcare handbook, which is translated into hundreds of different local languages, is first-line medical care. If you're in a country where school textbooks are beyond the reach of a poorer family, an internet connection and a feature phone and worldreader.org will connect you with thousands of school textbooks translated into local languages. And if you are somebody who lives in a despotic regime, who has the wrong, in inverted commas, religion, or the wrong, in inverted commas, political opinions, or the wrong, in inverted commas, sexuality, the internet is your window on the free world. As Mr. Ghonim, an Egyptian internet activist, said during the Arab Spring, if you want to liberate a country, give them the internet. And if you're tired of my hippie bullshit and you would like some numbers, McKinsey, the big management consultancy, said an increase in internet maturity, similar to the one experienced in mature countries over the past 5 years, creates an increase in real gross domestic product per capita of $500 on average during this period. By contrast, it took the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century 50 years to produce the same results. So making better websites, squandering less data, using less resources on end users' machines by making the sites better to start with, is helping people and making for a better web, because the web is not computers. The web is not clouds. The web is not a series of tubes. The web is for us, and we are these women in Africa. We're this blind chap in Toronto. We're these ladies I met on a bus in Bangladesh. We're this lady in a wheelchair on the pavement in Taiwan. We are this farmer and his granddaughter I photographed in Cambodia. And we're also these guys at a rock concert or a football match. And we're these ladies on the beach in India. And we're this chap on the metro in New York. This is who the web is for. As Sir Uncle Timbo said, this is for everyone. My name is Bruce Lawson. Other Bruce Lawsons are available. Thank you very much.